A thread by Carlos Osuita for Crazy Lady Donna Schroyer 4. I'm starting to feel a little like President Trump and the First Lady. It's great. Anyway, I said I lived in 5 countries with socialized medicine and all provide awful care. I broke Donna's heart, so she lashed out. Donna Schroyer tweeted, "Liar." Donna reminds me of a great Tracy Ullman skit 4 decades ago. Tracy wants to introduce her new boyfriend to her friends. When the friends are seated, Tracy brings out a ventriloquist's dummy. She sticks her hand in the dummy's back and clumsily makes it talk, and she tells her friends that he's the perfect boyfriend. Finally, someone says, "But Tracy, he's made of wood." "Don't ever say that!" Tracy screams. Donna doesn't want me to shatter her ventriloquist dummy fantasy about the holy sacrament of socialized medicine. But I will anyway, since I've lived it and she hasn't. I was born and raised in Venezuela. Until I moved to Texas at the age of 10 in 1972, I thought injections hurt like hell. That's because Venezuelan clinics used disposable needles over and over until they were blunt and had to be rammed in. My father said Venezuelan doctors could only do 2 things: deliver babies and remove arrows. My mother was allergic to bees, but there was no form of treatment in the entire country. One sting, and my mother would die. One Venezuelan doctor, hundreds of miles away, had studied in the USA and knew about allergen specific immunotherapy. He needed bees to give my mother this treatment. So, my father borrowed a flame proof suit from the oil company firefighting department and collected bees' nests all over the region. He put them in bags and popped them in the freezer. When the bees were frozen, my father put them in a flat Pyrex baking dish until he had thousands of them. It took weeks of bee collecting and weeks for the doctor to make the solution on his free time. But it was successful. Almost every male child in the oil camp broke his arm at some point. All the kids who went to Venezuelan doctors ended up with chicken feet, so they had to go to the US to have their arms rebroken and reset. I broke my arm when I was 9, and we went to the States. We had a Venezuelan doctor put on a traveling cast for the flight to Miami, and it cut off the circulation to my arm. A professional football player had to gently crack it open slightly. My arm was cold, blue, and numb. Next, the Netherlands. Tons of people over 25 had dentures, full sets. Our Dutch neighbors told us to never go to the hospital under any circumstances. Go right to the US. Doctors made house calls off the books. If you did things legally, you had to wait months for an appointment. If you paid cash, they'd come to your house to treat you for strep throat or the flu. My brother was in a bike accident and cut his foot. He had to get stitches. The clinic was filthy. We had to wait 9 hours. They sewed him up with nylon fishing line and a blunt needle. No anesthesia. He took the stitches out himself, left a lovely Frankenstein's monster scar. The doctors and nurses smoked while treating you. Next, Norway. The absolute worst. My sister got appendicitis and almost died. The rooms all had 4 patients in each, so her bed was in the hallway. She got no sleep for 10 days. My father had a nasal hemorrhage, so he went to the emergency room and bled for hours before they admitted him. Tried to stop the bleeding with a balloon, and they cauterized the vein. He ended up with a sinus infection. The treatment was from the Dark Ages. Norwegians don't believe in antibiotics. Their greatest terror is antibiotic-resistant bacteria, so your infection either clears up or you die. To drain my father's sinuses, they pounded a large diameter hollow needle through the bone above his eye sockets using a hammer. No anesthesia. During the 2 weeks he was in the hospital, they brought him no new robes and they didn't change the bedding once. We brought him new clothes and bedding daily. In 2 weeks, I never once saw a doctor or nurse, and my father's room was as dark as a dungeon, and the hospital was filthy. All doctors could be bribed. The Norwegians have no over the counter drugs, including aspirin. Everything is by prescription, except abortion. There's a black market for aspirin. Finally, Japan. Resident foreigners are not allowed health coverage, but that's okay. The Japanese had the worst teeth I've ever seen. Worse than British teeth. Link in the thread to the big book of British smiles. Enjoy. I paid cash to see a doctor because my ears were stopped up from not having been cleaned in years. He took a long bamboo toothpick and cleaned my ears manually, ramming my eardrums so many times it was like a torture in a prisoner of war camp. My head hurt for days. I started having dizzy spells, so I went to a doctor, and they told me I had to go get checked for a brain tumor. This was 1987, but they used 1950s x ray technology that required I be injected with a dye via my carotid artery. They ran a wire up the artery to my brain. No anesthesia. The stuff of nightmares. Talk about being made aware that you're as full of guts as something hanging on a hook in a slaughterhouse. In Japan, you just had to ride everything out because there was no real advanced treatment except for the wealthy. Fevers, food poisoning, styes. I had a horrendous caffeine overdose when some racist butthole made my iced coffee about 50 times stronger than it should have been. I went to the emergency room, and after they diagnosed me, they sent me on my way. The thing about socialized medicine is that it's inhumane. Not surprising, since the entire ideology of leftism is totally inhumane. Go live in Norway for 3 years, Donna. Then come back and tell me I'm a liar. You worship a false idol. Socialized medicine is the devil's handiwork. It was invented to kill people, especially old people. Daily Mail, Dutch doctor drugged patient's coffee and asked family to hold her. We're all going to be old someday. How would you like to be held down and killed by a doctor? I did not get along with my parents at all, but they were almost entirely helpless in their old age. When my brother and I caught two home invaders inside my parents' home while my father was there, he had no idea they were in the house. I almost gave them a one-way ticket to hell. I guess my brother and my father saw my face what was about to happen. They told the two to get in their car and go now. The home invaders were sheet white. They saw something in my face too. I've never been that angry in my life. Targeting elderly people? That's what socialized medicine does. Socialized medicine is another touchstone and diagnostic tool. If you hate people who oppose it, you're severely mentally ill and deeply immoral. Period.
I will be the greatest president that God ever created.